Hi, everyone. We're back and we're in conversation with the guys from Forefront Sims. We're going to be talking today about professional home simulator costs, space, and construction requirements. Um, Cliff and Tyler, if you want to just give a little bit of a background on yourselves and a little bit of an introduction to start, then we will get right into the questions.
Yeah, my name is Cliff. Cliff Stevens, founded Forefront about 2.5 years ago. Currently own and operate the business. Come from a technology background, trying to bring that to the golf sim space. Forefront is a custom design build firm. Everything's turnkey. We handle everything for our clients and try to create a really custom high-end space for them to enjoy with friends and family. And then Tyler, if you want to give a quick intro on yourself.
Yeah. Hey, folks. Tyler Brownfield, also with Forefront. I work across our sales and technology teams in both the residential and commercial space as well, too. So working with Cliff and all of our crews, as well as Cody and the rest of the team to make sure we deliver the best simulator product that we can when we do our projects and installations.
Awesome. Well, we've got a we've got a handful of questions today, so let's get right into it. Our first one today is, how much should homeowners budget for a professional grade golf simulator installation?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. I mean, it's the classic. It depends. We like to give a range of around $50,000 to $100,000. It's certainly, there's many factors that drive the budget of a golf simulator, right? The space we're trying to create, what we're currently working with, how many impediments we have to handle. We are full service design and build, so we can remove walls, we can add wood trim feature walls, raised putting floors with elevation, right? So it really just kind of depends on the scope, scale, and technology that we're trying to put in for a customer. Are we adding in multi-sport simulators? Are we adding in shooting simulators, frisbee, disc golf simulators? We've done racing and flight simulators, right? So it's just the sky's the limit, and it really depends on the technology, the scope, and the scale. Are we adding in a bar, extra lounge area? It really just depends, but that 50,000 to 100,000 is a pretty good range for a residential indoor golf simulator. Tyler, anything I missed there?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it all. It's really about kind of what's the overall experience you're looking for. Do you just want this space for golf, or do you want it for larger group entertaining, multi-generational family entertaining? So a lot of those factors go into additional technology components, and as Cliff mentioned, overall sort of fit and finish of the space. So a lot of factors that can go into sort of adjusting that price and that investment up and down. But it generally tends to be worth it to have that kind of space that you're looking for the type of entertaining or golf performance that you want to achieve.
Yeah, two quick things I might add. I think sometimes customers come in comparing against a DIY solution, right? There's a lot that goes into building a golf simulator that customers may or may not account for when they're thinking about the cost. So that is why we like to have this conversation early with customers, so there's no surprises, right? We want you to understand what you're getting, understand what the costs are going to be. And then the other thing I would say, I mentioned, if you have the right space, the cost certainly can go well above that $100,000 mark for things like golf simulators or building an addition on the back of your house. So one budget range also to consider is if we're doing something like a golf shed in your backyard, that's going to be obviously a higher budget range. We've got to run electrical, do HVAC, build a structure. And those are more in the $100,000 to $200,000 range. Obviously, again, depending on size, scale, complexity, all the things we talked about before.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you guys just are able to do everything in that range. I think it's good for people to know, because I would have never, before I was talking to you guys, I would have never known that I could just build a shed in the back of my house to do this. I would have thought that I needed the space.
Yep.
So going on to the next question, kind of actually feeds into that idea of, do you have the space or not? But what room dimensions are required for a permanent home golf simulator?
Tyler, you want to jump on that one?
I can jump in on this one. So I'll talk about what's ideal, and then we can talk about sort of actual required spaces. So if we're talking about an ideal space, you'd want a space that has 16 feet of width, at least 18 feet of depth, and ideally 10-foot or taller ceilings. So those are the ideal dimensions. We can certainly work with smaller dimensions. If you've got 16 feet of width, then you can have lefties and righties hit from the center of the screen with no issue. If you have less width than that, let's say down to like 12 or even 11 feet, you can still have a great golf simulator, but you're going to end up hitting what we call offset. So you won't be hitting from the center of the screen. You'll be hitting more to the right or the left in those situations. In the case of the depth with 18 feet, what's ideal about that is we can put you 10 feet from the screen. So you have a very immersive experience. You're safe from balls coming back to you if you're hitting a very high ball speed driver. And then you've got enough safety space behind you, so you're not going to accidentally hit somebody if they're standing behind. But again, you can get closer to the screen. You can make sure that there's walls or separators or knee walls behind you for safety areas. So we can work with less depth. And then from a ceiling height perspective, we've done plenty of simulators. Even my own personal simulator is 9 feet tall ceilings. We're able to make that work just fine for, generally speaking, for average height folks. But I know Cliff and others would tell you, like, one of the biggest things we always recommend if you're concerned about your space is getting the longest club you have, typically the driver, and going and doing some slow swings in the space and kind of building yourself up to full swing to see if you're coming into the contact with other impediments, the ceiling height, those types of things are probably the most important thing, because if you don't feel comfortable swinging in that space consciously, definitely subconsciously, you're not going to feel comfortable swinging in the space, and that's going to have a worse impact on your swing overall.
Yeah, I think you covered it. Maybe the only thing I'd add is you'll always feel a little uncomfortable when you first start swinging indoors, right? Most people, there's a little bit of an adjustment period. So, you may feel slightly uncomfortable, but as long as you can take a pretty aggressive full swing and not hit anything, you'll adjust to the space over time. So yeah, like Tyler said, 9 feet, super doable. We do it all the time. But even if you have less than 9 feet, again, there's options, right? We are a full service construction firm. So we can dig down. We can gain a foot or two digging down and create some steps down into the room. And honestly, creates a pretty visually appealing type room. So that's cool. Again, cost, right? There's certainly cost to some of these things. There's also structural things we can do, right? In some newer homes, there's 18-foot web trusses above the room. We can put in a 3-inch or 6-inch steel beam with an engineer, gain you somewhere between 9 and 12 or 16 inches potentially. So again, there's options, and that's why we oftentimes can put a simulator in a room. Most people would say, yeah, that's not feasible, because we can do some of these kinds of workarounds. And obviously, again, budget impacts and all that kind of stuff. And then as far as depth, totally agree with Tyler. 18 is great. With more, typically more can be better. 20, 22, 24 feet of depth, that starts to give us room for sort of lounge space behind, places for your friends to congregate while you're playing. So 18, really good number for a simulator. But then if we want people behind, we need obviously more.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to know. Because I feel like a lot of people, I'm assuming even when they call you guys, they're wanting to know those options.
Yep.
But moving on to the next question here. How do you know if a basement, garage, or a bonus room can actually support a golf simulator?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what we just talked about. So, it's the room dimensions. The other things that come into play are things like impediments, right? Do you have a big HVAC line running through the room, or a gas line that we've got to either contend with or move? A lot of times soffits, are designed into a room, whether they're needed to run HVAC lines or other mechanical items for your house, or they're decorative, right? They can be in the way and cause a problem. So it's really the dimension's the biggest aspect. And then you could look at things like electrical, right? Do we have the right electrical to support it? That's not usually a major problem, and we can solve it if it is. So, those are some of the considerations. HVAC, right? We'll put a simulator in a garage, and people don't always think about I'm in Atlanta, Tyler's in Indiana. Like Atlanta summers are brutal. Like you don't want to be swinging in your garage in 94-degree heat. You're never going to use the thing. So that's kind of all of the things that we try to think about, right? Is it going to, not only can we do it physically, but are you going to enjoy it and have a good time after? And then even some of the equipment, right? You don't want this equipment sitting in highly humid environments. So, we do HVAC, like typically a mini split if we're doing a garage, keeps the garage nice and cool. So those are some of the things. Again, in a garage, you've got garage door tracks running overhead. We've got all sorts of solutions to help with side-mounted garage door motors and moving those things out of the way. So basically, we come into a space and there's all sorts of impediments that are going to challenge you to have a golf swing and enjoy it. And we figure out how to remove those so that you can do it.
Yeah. I think sometimes maybe one other consideration, especially if you're doing this more inside of the house or on the basement, is considering some of the sound aspects as well too. So, there are a variety of things that we can do to help reduce or remove the transmission of sound throughout the rest of the house. But if your basement's going to be right underneath maybe a first floor bedroom or a living room, and the animal, maybe you've got some dogs or cats or animals or a spouse that doesn't necessarily care for it hearing every time you swing a driver, that may be a consideration to maybe move out to the garage, or as I mentioned before, do more sound treatment in between the floors, so that is less of a concern or an issue. So all the things Cliff said, plus I know that's another common thing that comes up is just sound throughout the rest of the house when you've got a foursome scramble playing and everybody's hitting constantly.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a great point on the sound, Tyler. Like my simulator in my room over here, we put a ton of insulation above the simulator. We did 2 layers of drywall with green acoustical glue in between. And there's even additional steps you can take with, offsetting your drywall from the studs. You can literally make the room almost soundproof. Again, it just sort of, how quiet does the customer want it? What budget are we working with? And is it worth the investment to make sure nobody's going to hear it when you're swinging your clubs? But yeah, that's right on.
Yeah. It's cool because those are so many things that I would have, as more of a consumer side of things, never even thought of. But that's really awesome. So going on to the next question, what ceiling height is needed for a residential golf simulator? Maybe this is a bit of a quicker question, but I think
I'll cover this because I know we've kind of covered it in some of the other questions about just general dimensions. So Cliff had said it before, but I would say at a minimum, we would typically encourage 9 feet of ceiling height, ideally 10 feet or higher. But back to what we were saying previously, it's really about having the golfer go in there, take some swings, start slow, ramp up to get to something pretty close to their full swing, and make sure that they feel comfortable in there. Again, variety of factors in terms of not only the golfer's height, but how steep or how shallow their natural swing is. Changes sort of the dynamics that we need. And back to the point, if your ceiling height is not ideal, it's not in that 9-10 plus foot range, there's a variety of things we can help do to either lower the floor, potentially raise the ceiling, or again, look at something like a golf shed or a garage type simulator. So you've got options, even if you don't feel like you have the space currently, but obviously the budget and investment cost adjust accordingly.
And to be fair, we've also done simulators in below 9 feet ceilings. I don't recommend it, and it's kind of a proceed with caution. But I've had customers that are avid golfers, and they say, I want this in my house, and I just won't swing driver, or I'll choke down on driver, right? And so it's doable. It's just sort of, what are you trying to achieve? But yeah, the flip side of this is also too high of a ceiling can pose challenges, right? The equipment is sort of the unexpected answer here, right? Is that if your ceilings are 16 feet high, we've got to do some work to frame things in, build some bulkheads, because the equipment that is watching the golf ball likes to be right around 10 feet off the ground. It sort of, that you have a tolerance of like 9 to 10 feet. And if you put it at 14 feet, it's not going to work very well. So we do, if you had 14, 15, 16 foot ceilings, we would have to do a little bit of work to, accommodate that as well.
That's right.
No, that's good to know. You're right. That is unexpected. I wouldn't have even thought about that. So moving on to the next question, what construction work is usually required for a built-in home golf simulator?
Yeah, I can jump in. So really the basics of a standard simulator, right? I'll phrase this as like we're coming into a typical one, and then maybe we can cover some edge cases after. But a
Yeah.
typical golf simulator, we're gonna do some electrical and low voltage wiring, right? You probably don't have electrical outlets and low voltage wires in the right places or conduits, right? So we've got to run electrical for your launch monitor, for your projector, for your TVs, your computer. And then we need data cables going from all of those items back to the computer, right? So we need a Cat6 cable going from the launch monitor to the computer, HDMIs from your projectors to your computer, and so on. So lots of wiring considerations, right, to get all of the pieces of equipment talking to each other in the right way. We also like to plan for the future, right? So we'll put in conduit so that if something ever happens in the future, we can run, backup wires. Or if the technology changes in the future, we have some options. We don't have to go in and rip open drywall. There's sort of the electrical low voltage. A lot of times we have to do some framing, right? We build out walls and ceilings for your enclosure because we do custom built-in enclosures. So we're framing out with 2x4s and plywood and all that kind of stuff. We're always putting in, or 99% of the time, we're putting in putting turf, wall to wall in the room, recessing your hitting mat within the putting turf. We custom build our ceiling and wall protection, right? So the pads that go up and around create that shadow box around the screen. We build those and install those. There's structural support we have to put in to help with the screen, right? So we run structural support up and around so we can attach your screen up and around. And then, from there, there's, we put in your, hang your TVs, connect them all up. There's a lot of configuration work that has to happen. So installing all the software, configuring it, loading the licenses, calibrating it, and stuff like that. And then there's, some add-on stuff, right? We can build a raised putting floor with putting cups embedded in it. We can do LED lighting in and around the raised putting floor to create some kind of, moody effects and things like that. We'll do a lot of knee walls. It's funny, I'm looking over at my golf simulator here just to get some ideas. So we do a lot of knee walls with countertops. So you can sit around with your friends, waiting your turn on a bar stool. I listed a lot of things. Tyler, what did I miss?
Well, I think some recent examples I think of are also, we've done quite a few conversions of existing movie rooms, right? So home had a movie room that was the it thing a while ago, and now a lot of folks want to convert those into golf simulators. So they know that they might have like an outlet where the projector was for the movie room, but typically with golf simulators, we use a different style of projector for the simulation impact screen. So normally what's called a short throw projector as opposed to a long throw projector, which is what was normally used for movie theaters. And what that really means is, typically those ceiling outlets are something like 17 or 18 feet back in the room. And realistically, ideally, we need them closer to 9, 10, 11 feet for these short throw projectors. So even in those scenarios where, okay, yes, there is already at least a ceiling outlet up there, we need to still ideally move that so we're not running some sort of channel up on the ceiling. We can get it back to where it can be for the launch monitor and the projector itself. So that's maybe more of a scenario where the clients feel like they've got all the pieces. We don't have to do a lot of the electrical, but then when we actually go and look at it, we can point out some of those additional considerations.
Yeah, and then I would add, most simulator rooms, especially if it's a retrofit, we're having to run wires in an already finished room. So we've got to cut some holes in the walls and the ceilings to run those wires. We come back and patch and paint that to make it look like nothing ever happened. So there's a lot of drywall, whether it's a new room we're building or a retrofit. We're doing a lot of drywall work, a lot of paint work. A lot of times we're doing really nice kind of wood trim features on the walls and the ceiling. So there's staining and painting, all that kind of stuff.
So we kind of obviously covered a certain aspect of this with the electrical, but I mean, I'll ask the whole question, and obviously we'll probably just focus more on the lighting aspects of things. But what electrical and lighting requirements should be planned before installation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll jump in on this one, Cliff, is starting. And to your point, Steve, maybe we'll talk a little bit, maybe more focus on the lighting considerations. So one of the things that's probably the biggest things we have to work around from a simulator space is just controlling the overall mixture of the ambient light and then any added light that we added to the space. So just with the nature of projectors, whether it's in a golf simulator or a movie theater setup, the more ambient light you have, the more it's going to impact your black levels and the overall sort of contrast ratio on the screen and your overall picture quality. So one thing we try to do is come up with ways to control any ambient light that's sort of outside of the space that might be coming in. So sometimes that's including curtains or putting up additional walls. And then in terms of the actual lighting in the room, you do want lights to be able to turn on when people are coming in, and ideally they're dimmable, so you can bring it down to a level you're controlling the lights. Sometimes another consideration, especially for the more performance focused golfers that want to do more like swing camera analysis and high speed video capture, we will actually put in additional lights specifically for the swing camera capture, because with the nature of those high speed cameras, they go anywhere from 120 FPS up to 1000 FPS. And in order for them to be able to capture a good image, especially in color, you actually have to have a lot of light on the golfer specifically just to enable that. So just going back through, biggest things are controlling ambient light, having manageable light, dimmable light inside the simulator space that you can control to improve the overall image quality on the screen, the contrast ratio, the contrast levels. But again, additional considerations, if you're more performance focused and want to do swing capture analysis and have high quality slow motion video, you actually need the ability to turn up a lot of light in those situations and have that accounted for. But Cliff, you can cover anything else.
Yeah, I mean, my personal preference is kind of a dark, moody room, right? When I'm playing golf, I like the projector screen to kind of glow. I've got my LED lights up and around our padding, and we do that on probably 70 or 80% of our simulators, is just a nice dimmable LED kind of to frame the room. And then I have a little pin light, and we do that in a lot of customer rooms where it just shines down on the ball. So my preference is like a pin light on my ball, my LED lights around my screen, and then the projector glow, and it's nice and dark and awesome. So everybody has a preference. I love that, just kind of like dark, just the LEDs shining. And then one last thing, you don't think about it, but you're in a confined space hitting balls one after another, and it gets kind of hot. So I also like to plan for a fan. So like I've got a little kind of ceiling wall mounted nice fan that oscillates and keeps some air flowing in the room, because it gets kind of warm when you're hitting balls one after another. So planning for some fans and air movements also another key thing that I think a lot of people miss out on.
Yeah, that's probably, again, we've covered this in some other questions, but just on the electrical side, back to this like kind of overall experience and fit and finish. Cliff brought up a good point with fans, but again, it gets into some of the other things we mentioned, having some electrical for a mini split, electrical potentially for a mini fridge. Those types of things add to the electrical load in the area, and making sure we've got the right amperage and number of circuits going into the space. Those are just other, again, gets back to the overall. I focus a lot on sort of just the golfing experience, but if you're doing more entertaining, those types of things, there's other additional kind of electrical load considerations that we'd want to factor in.
Yep.
No, that makes total sense. I like that kind of attention to detail. So going on to the next question, how does the cost of a custom home golf simulator change based on room size and finish level?
Yeah, I mean, so we've talked about it a little bit, but the biggest factors driving budget are going to be the technology you select. So the level of launch monitor, a launch monitor retail can be $2,000 or $500, all the way up to $25,000 or $30,000. So technology is a huge driver. 4K versus 1080p. The level of quality of the technology. Are you doing a multi-sport? So technology is a huge driver. The fit and finish is a huge driver. So those are probably the two most important things, right? Are we doing super high-end putting turf? Are we doing a wood trim feature wall? Are we doing, oak stained countertops on your knee walls, right? Like those two things are your biggest drivers. The size of the room has a little bit less of an impact. It's probably a marginal impact. Whether you're doing a 13 by 15 or 13 by 17 room versus a 16 by 20. There's a little bit more putting turf. The screen might be a little bigger. We have to do a little bit more pads. So, but it's kind of marginal, right? It's not going to have a massive, order of magnitude type impact on the cost. So really your drivers are technology, fit and finish, and then within fit and finish, are we doing extra things, right? Like I said, the wood trim walls, the knee walls, the convertible wood slats, so you have a kind of open or closed room if you want. Hidden doors, right? A lot of times we do a hidden door in the padding because there's a closet back behind where we need to access, and we still want to have our pads. Are we doing a bar? Are we doing an additional lounge area? All of those things are really what kind of drives the cost. Less so the size of the room. And then I would say, again, kind of counterintuitively, sometimes a smaller room actually increases the cost because we have to do a lot of things to accommodate and make it playable, right? We either need to put a launch monitor on a slider, which definitely complicates the build. We've got to plan for shadows in a different way and orient things in a different way. Or we have to upgrade to a higher end launch monitor that has a larger hitting area so that the golfer, can hit for an offset like Tyler was talking about before. So counterintuitively, actually a smaller room sometimes can increase the price. Go ahead, Tyler, if I missed anything there.
Yeah. Well, I'm just generally out onto everything Cliff said. When we think about fit and finish and, working with clients to fit kind of within their budget, there's always some concept of like a good, better, and best, right? So maybe there are some specific wall finishes or wall slats that they want to go with, or at least a general design aesthetic. Maybe they don't want to invest in sort of the best option or the highest end option, but so what can we find in sort of that good and better category so we can still help them achieve the overall design and aesthetic that they're looking for, but that work within the budget that they're trying to stay within. So, just back to Cliff's point of there are a variety of options out there, a lot of things to do. We've got a lot of clients that are very creative and want to do something a little bit different. So we're always open to finding some solutions to help make that happen for them.
I think that's it's definitely an in-depth answer to the question. It's much appreciated. So my next question is actually regarding, portable versus built-in. But what's the difference between a portable simulator versus a fully built-in simulator?
I can jump in there. So that really goes back to the technology that we're talking about, right? So there are ceiling mounted launch monitors, which is going to be kind of your most robust, most professional looking, sleek, high end, similar performance. They may outperform slightly. They're going to have larger hitting areas. So your ceiling mounted launch monitors are not going to be portable, right? That we mount it to the ceiling. It's fixed in your room. Again, it's kind of your most permanent, professional looking install. Then you have floor mounted launch monitors. So just like the name would say, they sit on the floor. Typically you can move them around, right? So that is one way you can accommodate lefties and righties. If you have a floor mounted launch monitor, you just pick it up and rotate it to the other side. And then the other, the lefty or righty can hit from the other side of the launch monitor. The next tier would be a portable floor mounted launch monitor. So you've got a Unicore iMini, you've got the Bushnell Launch Pro, GC3, GC Quad type devices. The TrackMan 4s were portable. So your portable launch monitor can be integrated in as a part of a fixed golf room, right? A professionally built high-end golf room. You can just have a portable launch monitor. And then when you want to go to the range, you unplug a couple wires, it's got a battery in it. You take it to the range with you, set it up, it watches you hit balls, gives you all your data on the range. So that's really kind of the biggest difference is sort of that the launch monitor you're using, one is floor mounted, two, it has a battery in it, and you can take it with you, wherever you go. That's kind of the biggest consideration. I guess you could also talk about sort of more portable setups. It's not as much about what we do. But sometimes people will have just sort of a hitting net with a launch monitor and an iPad. and you could take that almost anywhere you go and play golf. Set that up anywhere you go. You could go to an Airbnb and set it up in the backyard if you wanted, right? So there's kind of different levels of portability, but yeah, that kind of covers it. Tyler, anything I missed there?
Yeah, I think just on the last topic you were bringing up about the difference between let's call it like a golf net sort of setup and then a more permanent installation like we would do. It's really just, again, about what experience you're looking for. What do you want to show people when they're coming over? The portable net with a portable launch monitor that's got a battery on it, an iPad, works great. There's no issue with that kind of setup, but I would call it more of like a training type setup if you have that in your home. And that's how folks are going to view it versus something that's more permanently installed, framed up, looks intentional in the space. So there's no right or wrong to either of those. It's just, again, about kind of what experience you want to have, what flexibility you want to have, and what do you want people to experience when they're coming over and partaking in the space with you as well.
Yep.
What should be included in a feasibility assessment for a home golf simulator?
I'll start off with this one. So it's kind of a checklist of a lot of things we've covered previously. So, one is just what are your overall space dimensions? Do you feel reasonably comfortable swinging your longest club inside of the space, not being concerned about hitting the ceiling, the wall behind you, the wall to your side? That's one of the most core pieces. I think the next is, and this is where professionals can help, is considering some of the electrical load and setup in that space. The overall, whether the space is climate controlled or not. It gets back to some of the things Cliff and I were talking about, HVAC and mini splits and those types of things. Those are a lot of the key pieces. If you can't swing in there, that's kind of a showstopper. If we can't support the electronics and the components like that, that's a bit of a scenario where we need to consider something else, or again, have a professional come in and set up the pieces that you need. Those are a lot of the key considerations. And then again, does that, outside of just your swing, does that space accommodate what you want the experience to be? If you want this to be an entertaining space, but it's only big enough for one person to swing and no place for folks to sit, then that causes us to look at other space options or other considerations. But Cliff, anything else you would put on there that we haven't brought up already?
I think the only thing I would say is we help clients through that, right?
Right.
I can't count the number of times we've been to a client's house. I'm thinking of one locally here. I went and did the site visit, and the client's like, "Here's my room," and it was like 9 by 11. And we have to deliver some hard news sometimes that, hey, this is not going to work, right? It was close to his bar. It seemed pretty cool. But we, as the experts, have to say, you're never going to be able to have a functional golf simulator in this space. And even if we did build it, you would hate it, right? And that's the last thing we want, is somebody to invest in something in their home that they think they're going to love, and it's not going to be a good experience. So honestly, that's part of our job, is to help customers through that and say, hey, show us some other rooms in your house. Let's go look at your backyard. Let's go look at your garage. And that customer just happened to have a beautiful garage space that worked perfectly. And we built a great simulator in his garage, put a mini split in, and he was a super happy customer at the end of the day. But if he just would have DIY'd it or found a company that would have come and done that for him, he would have been miserable, right? It would have been unusable, and he would have invested a lot of money and wasted it. So again, that's part of our job, is to help clients through that decision process of where should we put this, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I love that, because honestly, as the consumer, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
So working with a team of experts that actually is willing to give that hard news, I think is invaluable. Seriously. Going on to the next question. What are the biggest hidden costs in a residential golf simulator project?
I'll say, with us, there are no hidden costs, right? We are a fixed fee, fixed price firm. So when we come in, assess your space, understand your impediments, our quote or our proposal with the price on it is the price you're going to pay. You show up and bring golf clubs and golf balls, right? So
Nice.
I'd like to caveat, we don't have hidden costs. We do tell customers, hey, if we're going to open that wall, there may be something in that wall we don't know about, and we'll have to accommodate and figure out later. So there can be unforeseen construction costs, which we try to be upfront with about our customers. And we rarely do change orders. It's only if something like that were to come up, or if the customer says midway through the project, I'd love to add this awesome wood feature wall on this wall and surround my TVs. Sure, that's going to be a change order, but just a forefront caveat: there are no hidden costs with us. But I would say the biggest hidden costs for a golf simulator build would be the things I just talked about. Right, we're going to open this wall so you have more space for your simulator. Well, now we just found out there's electrical wires running through that wall. There's your main drain stack for your house is in that wall. HVAC is in the ceiling or in the wall. We have to open up, right? So those would probably be some of your biggest hidden costs. It's sort of the construction unknowns. And then again, sort of a slightly different view on that answer is we see customers that go with a company that's cheaper, doesn't have the experience, or they try to DIY it. And that's honestly the biggest hidden cost we've seen in this industry is customers do that. Either they DIY it and don't know exactly what they're doing, they pay a company that doesn't know what they're doing, and then they have costs to come fix the project that they just did. And we do those projects all the time where a customer says, hey, I paid this company that doesn't have a whole lot of experience doing this. They did a really bad job. It's unusable. There's balls flying back, hitting the wall behind me. The screen's not holding up, whatever it may be. And then we have to come in and do kind of a retrofit project to fix that golf simulator to make it functional. So that, sometimes the cheapest option isn't the best option, and you're going to get what you pay for. And then to me, so that's probably the biggest hidden cost we've seen is customers that invest in something like this and don't get what they think they're going to get.
I don't have much to add to that. I think Cliff covered all the key parts there. But just to reiterate, we're very thorough upfront to try to account for all those considerations going into it, just because we've done so many simulators. And I think that's a key consideration, right? You want to work with somebody who does this day in and day out and has crews that are trained and actually work for the company. We're not just subbing out labor to come do some of this work. Like, we have our own employees, and they've been trained and they've done multiple simulators, and that they have supervision as well too from our crew leads. So that's the biggest thing to get out ahead of considerations for hidden costs and coming up with creative and safe solutions to work around some of those impediments that we've run across.
Yeah, there's an old saying that that comes to mind when you guys talk about that if you think it's expensive to hire a professional, try hiring an amateur.
Yeah. Right on.
Exactly. Going on to the next question. How should homeowners plan screen placement, flooring, sound, and wall protection?
So this is right up your alley, I feel like.
Yeah. I think the first answer is call a professional. So back to what we were just saying. That's a lot of the work and effort that we do to help clients figure those things out without them having to spend all the time researching, maybe seeing different opinions online about where screens should be, what kind of flooring to use. We can present all of those options on things that we know actually work based on all of our simulator builds, and help them come up with that. I think the feedback we typically are looking from our clients are things like, is sound a concern for them, or how much of a concern is it? Do they have younger kids that are going to be playing, so they're more concerned about wall protection and having more padding come out from the wall? And then things like the screen placement very much correlates with the projector that we end up choosing and getting all that placement right. It gets back to a lot of, if you try to DIY a lot of this yourself, there's a lot of, I think we'll call it hidden research that you may not be expecting to figure out, okay, what's the right screen size that works for the projector that I'm going to get? How far does it need to be? How much can it be up or off the ground? Am I going to create shadows from my launch monitor where it gets installed? So those are all the things that we just help take off the table for our clients, and help them come up with all those considerations.
Yeah, covered it well. The only thing I'd add is those things are all interdependent, right? If you change your projector, that may change your projector placement and your screen size. If you change your screen size, that might change your projector decision or your projector placement. If you change from 1080p to 4K, that there's downstream impacts from that, right? So it's kind of an ecosystem of components, and one decision in one spot can impact everything else, right? So that's again where a professional that's done it hundreds of times, thousands of times can really help you through that, not make some of those costly mistakes.
I mean, that makes total sense. I think we're actually coming up on the last question here, and it's something I think some of the other questions we've had today, we've touched on them previously, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. When should a homeowner involve a professional installer instead of just buying the equipment directly?
I mean, I guess I would say it sort of just depends on the outcome they're trying to achieve, right? Certainly there's budgetary constraints. There's always going to be DIY, people that want to DIY things, and that's fine. And we respect that and support that. So I would say, you have to have a certain level of technical proficiency and handiness to just go buy this equipment and install it. I think people drastically, in hundreds of conversations with customers in the sales process, customers consistently and drastically underestimate the cost of some of these things. They just price out the 4 or 5 major components, and they don't think about, okay, I've got to buy a screen. Well, there's freight and tax on that. I have to think about the hardware that it's going to take to mount that screen on my walls and on my ceiling, and am I going to be able to hit stuff? So I would say, there's a significant amount of time and expertise that's required to do this and do it right. And if you don't have that in spades, it's really, really important to call a professional. So that's where I would go. The other thing I hear customers say sometimes is, well, can I save money by buying the equipment and then you install it? In full transparency and honesty, no, right? Like, we are a professional that does this all day, every day. We buy hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of this equipment every year. So we're going to get the best pricing on this stuff in the world. And so, no, you're going to go pay full retail, whereas we don't have to, right? So I think, there's sort of a DIY versus not consideration. And then, do I just go buy some of the equipment on my own? But my guidance is, if you're going professional, let the professional company handle everything soup to nuts. We run into more problems than not when a customer goes and buys something themselves. Because one, it throws our processes off. We've got kind of a well-oiled machine running. Two, they might buy the wrong thing. It might be defective. Now, if it's defective, you're having to handle the return to the manufacturer. You're having to deal with a warranty claim, right? So our guidance is always, if you're going to go professional, let us handle everything for you. And that's kind of the best way to do it. Tyler, anything I missed there?
Yeah, I think the simplest answer is, if you just want your experience to be, have some initial consult conversation, and then the next thing is ultimately you get to pull a club out and hit a ball, then you want to go that professional route, with particularly ideally with a design and build firm, so that they can handle all of the turnkey elements for you. And again, you're just kind of showing up to play and learn how to use the system. If you're more hands-on, you want to know how everything works, you're open to the research, the putting all the pieces together. Maybe you don't want to put, have the overall fit and finish and hide the wires professionally in the walls, then you can definitely go the direct or sort of DIY route. So both routes can get you to a simulator experience that gives you a good golf simulator experience, the accuracy you're looking for. But it's really just more about how valuable is your time, the time to research, the time to actually do it, the time to get things wrong and have to fix them, which inevitably will happen. So I think those are all the key considerations of whether you go the professional investment route, especially with a design and build focused firm, or if you want to go more the DIY route.
And just a personal anecdote, I'm a big DIYer in my home for most anything, and my wife always guides me, your time is very valuable, and your estimate that's going to take you 2 hours is always wrong. I always underestimate by 4, 5, or 10x the time it's going to take me. So I would say a golf simulator is something most people have never built. and it's going to take you 4 or 5 or 10 times the amount of time and money you think it's going to take.
Yeah. No, I'm the same exact way in my house as well. I mean, I think it even just goes to show, I mean, the amount of answers that we even got today with these questions that I would have just absolutely never thought of is
Yep.
exactly that. I mean, I'm a DIYer myself on so many things in my house, but it is just it's a completely different beast than you know doing some random construction thing or
100%.
redoing a bathroom or redoing something
Yep.
else that may be used to. So I think that's awesome. Thank you guys so much for your time today. I think this has been really helpful. And seriously, I think a lot of these questions are going to be absolutely invaluable for people who are looking to get into the space.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good.
All right. Thanks, guys.